I'm Aparna Gupta, the Assistant Director of Student Chapters here at ACS, and I hope you all had a great lunch with Joanne Wallace and have enjoyed all of the panels today. I wanted to begin this panel, Students as Advocates, by introducing our moderator, Meredith Gallen. Meredith is a student at UCLA, and she's a co-president of our fabulous UCLA ACS chapter. She's also a student in the Public Interest Program and UCLA's very innovative Critical Race Studies program. I'm a little biased because I'm also a UCLA law alum. She's graduating this May, and like many of you, she is contemplating a career in the public interest. So we wanted to have this panel to really allow all of you to think about an issue that you are passionate about and see how these distinguished panelists have taken an issue that they really cared about and really sort of made a career out of it, to help give you some ideas of what you could do. On a quick housekeeping note before I turn the mic over, immediately following this panel, we will be going into Breakout Session C, which is designed to help you get a little bit more face time with the panelists, but also actually think and strategize about public policy issues. And so if you'll look here and on that side of the room, each of you should have a little sticker on the back of your name tag with a table numbers, and those table numbers correspond to which room that you will go into after this panel. So I'll turn it over to Meredith, and I hope you'll welcome this distinguished panel of speakers with me.
Thank you so much, Aparna. So we're hoping that after this morning's panels and the speakers from today and last night that you're feeling very inspired to think about ways that you can directly contribute to advancing the racial and social justice movement in the United States. And so this panel is designed to help you realize that you don't have to wait until you pass the bar and you're a, quote, real lawyer to get involved in transforming your communities. So we have a distinguished panel today of individuals who've taken ideas and with the support of organizations like ACS and community networks have been able to make those ideas and passions a reality. So without further ado, this is a shorter panel than the panels in the morning, so I'm going to let the speakers do most of the talking themselves. They can give you a little bit of their bio background, and then we'll have a longer period of question and answer so you can ask them specific questions about their particular career routes. But immediately to my left is Kathleen Clyde. She is a state representative in the Ohio State House. She's serving in the 75th District in Northeast Ohio, and she is a graduate of Ohio State Moritz College of Law. Next up, we have Adam Morfeld. He is the founder of Nebraskans for Civic Reform. He started the organization before he started law school and continued it throughout his time there at Nebraska College of Law. And all the way at the end of the panel, we have Angela Mcrae, who is the founder of Project Remade. She is currently a 3L at Stanford, and she started the organization as a 1L. So let's give our panel a warm welcome. We're going to start with Kathleen. She'll give you a little bit of information about herself, and we'll go down the panel, and then we can open it up to some questions.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. And it's great to be here. Thank you. Big thank you to ACS for all that it's done for me since I was a founding student chapter member at Ohio State, and then a lawyer chapter member in Columbus, now a lawyer chapter member in Northeast Ohio, which is the area that I represent in the state legislature. And I think my role here is to encourage all of you to consider running for office. We've talked a lot about how you can impact the legislature and how you can lobby and all these terrible laws that we have on the books in our states across the country. And I tell you, one way that you can really make an impact and start to change some of that and do it quickly and effectively is to be a member of your state legislature and to consider running for office. And in Ohio, the state legislature is where many of our statewide elected officials have gotten their start. You guys may know Senator Sherrod Brown, who I'm very proud is a great U.S. Senator from Ohio, started in the legislature when he was 21. Our governor, who I'm not as excited about, got his start in the state legislature, and that's where our president started in his state legislature in Illinois. So something for you all to consider, and I'd love to talk to you more in the breakout session, but just encourage you all to think about that, because I think it's intimidating and not something we all consider is for us, but I think the more like-minded ACS types and young people that we got in our legislatures, we really could make an impact and make it fast. I graduated in 2008 from Ohio State, and I kind of decided in law school that I may want to run for office. There were a lot of, no offense, my male ACS friends are great, but a lot of the men in law school talked about when they were governor or when they were a congressman. And it always kind of annoyed me that the women never said that. So I started talking about, well, when I run for office, even though it sounded very scary to me and I didn't necessarily think I would do it, I wanted women to be talking about being leaders and running for office as well. So it sort of became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I talked about it a lot. And I was involved politically. Ohio State's in the state capitol. So while I was a law student, I did a legislation clinic that we have at Ohio State. I worked for the Ohio Secretary of State. I interned in the Ohio Senate. So I was very involved in state government and sort of got to know it better. But I'll tell you, I didn't have a job when I graduated from law school. Typical public interest route. You're not sure where you're going to go. It's not like the big firm route where they lock you in early. So I was one of the few people in my class that didn't have a job, but I took the bar exam, and within a week I was hired. I had asked the Obama campaign where they wanted me in Ohio, and they asked me to run the early vote center in Franklin County, which is where 60,000 people cast their vote, most of them for Barack Obama, in Ohio. And then I went on to work in the Ohio House. Democrats had just taken back the House, and the new speaker asked me if I would come and be on his senior staff. So I got right away some access into how the State House worked and what it took to run for office. And after a year of doing that job, so I was barely a year out of law school, I decided to quit my job, move to my home area, which was kind of rural Northeast Ohio, and give running for office a try. Somehow I made it in a very terrible climate in 2010, and became the youngest elected woman in the entire Ohio legislature, House or Senate. And it's been a great experience that I hope to talk to you about a little more.
My name is Adam Morfeld, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Nebraskans for Civic Reform. And a lot of people ask me, what is that? What is civic reform? And really, I'll get to why I started it and how it got started, because I think that's what I'm supposed to talk about today. I think I'm supposed to convince you guys all to start nonprofits. So if you decide not to run for office, you can do both, actually. But anyway, Nebraskans for Civic Reform works to create a more modern, robust democracy. And so the way that we approach it is that there's a front-end civic engagement and education problem that has to be addressed. Not only in our K-12 schools, but in our colleges and adults not in college and beyond. So we work to create innovative kind of custom programs in our schools to get students engaged in the community and get community leaders engaged with students. Then we approach, after the front-end civic engagement and education problem, we also approach it from there being a policy problem. That if we get people engaged in the process, we get them engaged in democracy, but yet they show up to the polling place and they're turned away because of socioeconomic status, because they're students and they move around a lot, then what we did in the schools is really pointless. People will go to their polling location for the first time and try to vote, and then they'll get turned away and they'll be discouraged. And unless a lot of us here, we live and breathe politics. If we got turned away, we'd be pissed off, we'd write a letter of complaint, we might hire an attorney, we'll be attorneys, we might file a complaint or something. But a lot of people go home disenchanted, disenfranchised, and feeling like government failed them and that they don't have a voice. So we believe that there's a front-end civic engagement education issue that must be addressed, but we also believe that there is an overarching policy issue that has to be addressed as well. So we have a pretty robust civic engagement program that we run with AmeriCorps members, and then we also have a fairly robust public policy component where we have several bills introduced in our state legislature each year. Everything from election day registration, online voter registration, and then we oppose things like voter ID, which we were able to defeat in a very, very hostile environment in the legislature, so we're happy about that. How we got started, and then I'll turn it over to Angela. In 2006, I worked for the Democratic Party as a field organizer, and I saw a lot of people being turned away from the polls. I saw a lot of people not understand the process, and I decided to look into ways, particularly among youth, to increase turnout, to increase education. And after working on those issues in student government, I decided I wanted to continue to work on those issues, and I just decided that, or I also found out that, a lot of these issues that face young people face a lot of other people. And so these policy solutions are really wide-ranging in their effect and their impact. And so in 2008, I just started a very loose, non-incorporated organization. In 2010, we incorporated. And then in 2011, we got 501c3 status, and then we got major grant funding, and I quit my job at the firm. I think it was my second summer when I was supposed to be asking for a job. So the managing partner was a little baffled. He stopped playing Tetris for a minute when he realized I was quitting. But that was fun, I guess. It also kind of scary because you're taking a fairly big pay cut. But you find, and everybody says, and it's kind of cliche, is that pay is not everything, money is not everything, and it's been a really rewarding experience. I would say, as far as if you want to start a nonprofit, first identify if there's another nonprofit out there doing what you're doing, because it's really hard to get funding, and it's really hard to go out and start one if there's one that's already doing exactly what you're doing. So get looped in with them. But if there's something out there that isn't being addressed, there's a problem not being addressed, go out there and start something. Start something, and then start doing something, even if you don't have funding, to try to make it better, to try to change it. Because I have found that funders and people that support nonprofits, they really respect well-organized young people who have a vision. And if you can do that and show that you're passionate, you're organized, that you have a plan, you'd be surprised how many people want to support you. And don't be afraid to ask for money. I was terrified of asking for money. The worst thing that can happen is that they'll say no. That really is the worst thing. So anyway, I'll answer you guys' questions about running a nonprofit. I don't know if I'm over time. I haven't seen the flag yet, but I'll let Angela go for it.
So I'm Angela McCray, and I started Project Remade here at Stanford. Remade stands for Reentry, Making a Difference Through Entrepreneurship, and the program is focused on aiding people in the reentry process by using the skills of entrepreneurship to help them gain economic independence and social capital in the business community. As Meredith said, I started this program as a 1L. Here at Stanford, we're on the quarter system, and in my winter quarter, you get to pick one elective, and I took a class on sentencing and corrections. In that class, it was taught by Joan Petersilia, who's been writing and researching about California criminal justice policy for 30 years. She had written a book some years ago about reentry, and in her book, she had recommendations to how to improve the reentry process. So one of our writing assignments was to review her book and then offer up a suggestion of our own for how we would improve the reentry process. And one of my suggestions was teaching people coming home from prison or jail how to start their own businesses to get around the institutionalized barriers to getting hired in traditional employment. She liked what I had written and directed me to our newly hired executive director of our Criminal Justice Center, Debbie Muckmall, who had just come from the John Jay Criminal Institute in New York and surprisingly had written a whole monograph on entrepreneurship as a reentry option, which I didn't know. I had referenced her paper in my paper, and I had seen what she'd written about and used it as a big reference, and I had no idea she was here at Stanford running our Criminal Justice Center. So we started working together first to just talk about the idea and then to see if there was something we could do in that space here at Stanford as a student project. So that just involved a lot of calling around the country to other programs. There are a few other programs in the country that teach entrepreneurship to people that most of them are actually working inside of prisons or jails, teaching entrepreneurship. And then I luckily in that spring quarter took a class on social entrepreneurship, where we work on individual projects, and I put up this idea as a project to work on, and 7 people in the class wanted to work on it with me. So then we had a whole team of people that could go and do this research and determine whether or not there was something we could do here in the Bay Area. And then we've just been working on it ever since, worked throughout the summer, getting it ready, and had our first class beginning January of 2012. And that year we graduated 4 clients. This year we have 7 clients in the program that we're hoping to graduate. My impetus for starting this program kind of comes a lot from my own personal experience. I came to law school because I was interested in issues of economic justice. My family is from Louisiana, from a very small town in northeast Louisiana, right on the Mississippi River. My grandfather worked for a seed company for over 50 years. It took him 30 years to make more than $10 an hour. So I come from a place that is very economically depressed. But my parents had these great opportunities. My father went to the military and then went to college on VA benefits. My mother got a Pell Grant and went to college and became a teacher. And just kind of through hard work and determination, they've made a nice middle-class lifestyle for themselves. But I also have family members who didn't have that opportunity and who still struggle, who still live in poverty. I have uncles who are in and out of the criminal justice system. I have many family members who've been affected by the criminal justice system, who are talented, who are smart, who can work, but because of mistakes they've made, see a long-lasting effect on their lives of being able to be productive citizens. And so coming from a family, my father is also an entrepreneur. He's worked for himself for almost 30 years. I have an uncle who has his own accounting practice and has done that for years. I grew up with the idea that you can do things on your own despite the obstacles that may be in front of you, but it's not just you doing it on your own. There has to be some infrastructure that helps you get to that point. And my goal with Project Remade, being here at Stanford, coming from Texas, Louisiana, and coming here and seeing the resources that are available to people here at Stanford, it's an embarrassment of riches. It's, you know, the types of opportunities that a lot of people I know from home wouldn't dream about having. And there are people here, which I think is unique in a lot of ways to the Bay Area, a lot of people in the business community who want to give back, who are looking for ways to help people. And I just wanted to do something that could bring that environment and that spirit of giving and opportunity into a community of people that actually could use that and use it to their benefit to have some type of economic self-sufficiency. So I'm happy to hear your questions.
Okay, I'm going to start out with one question. I think that as law students, we often have trouble seeing past the next week's reading assignments or memo deadline. So how did you make space to conceive of a bold idea and stick to it? And what community support did you find at school or perhaps in the communities you were seeking to impact?
You're in school right now.
I am in school right now. It's a lot of work. I can't lie and say that this was easy or that I did it in my free time. As you know, as a law student, you don't have a lot of free time if you're really doing this right. But not to say you're not if you do, but I'm just saying there's not a lot of free time to just, you know, decide, oh, I'm going to start this thing and, you know, I'll be able to do everything I would have done otherwise. I had to make decisions. I chose to not do certain other things so that I could work on this idea. I worked, my first summer I was in Chile working at the University of Chile Law School, but I was having Skype calls and conference calls with people back here in the States trying to set this up so we'd be ready to go in September. I use my resources. As I mentioned, Debbie Muckamal is the biggest resource that I could have had here because she already had these connections all over the country with people that could tell me how to do this. I didn't make this idea from scratch in a way. While I thought it was original when I first had it, I found out that there are people all over the country who had this same idea. And so it was just kind of harnessing what they already knew to create something that would be unique to the resources that we had here at Stanford. Of course, there are no other programs doing it in a law school. So in that sense, it was different, and we had to do a lot of thinking about that. And then also, I tell people all the time, the last 2 years of my life has been spent preaching the gospel of remade. Like, everyone I meet, I tell them what I'm doing. Any student that says they might be interested, I ask them, what would you like to do? And I find a way for them to do that in the program. I just talk about it a lot, and I listen to everyone's ideas, and I think when people hear what you're doing, and if they believe in what you're doing, they'll find ways to be there for you and make the space for you to make it happen.
Yeah, during law school was really when NCR was developing. And up until my third year, we didn't have any paid staff. I wasn't compensated. We just had a board of directors, and I just volunteered a lot of my time for the policy research and the drafting of legislation, stuff like that. So it was tough. I mean, I was working at the firm 20 hours a week, and then I was probably putting 20 hours into this organization, and then I was, I think that's like an ABA violation or something, so don't say anything. But this isn't recorded, is it? And so the thing is I have always found that I am much more efficient. I am much more successful when I'm very busy. And maybe that just means I have a problem or workaholic. But for me, my grades actually started going up as I started getting busier, which is really frustrating, but an okay thing. And so I actually improved as I got busier. And then my third year, I was paid. I was a part-time paid executive director, and then luckily we got funding after my third year enough to bring me on full-time and bring on other staff. So it's tough, it's hard, but when you're passionate about something, it's totally worth it. And the great thing about working kind of in a policy area, whether it be with well, really anything, is that while you're in law school, you're learning about the law, but you're also having an impact on the formulation of the law, and maybe even drafting the law and creating the law. So for me, it was a great way to bring to life what I was learning in law school, and so it was very fulfilling. But yeah, it's tough work, but even if you aren't starting up something or out there affecting change of some sort, you're going to be busy during law school. You find time to, there's always something to do.
I would say, and I don't know that I realized this quite at the time, but I really used law school as a training ground to run for office as best I could. And the example I can think about the most, that was the most helpful, I was the president of our Public Interest Law Foundation, PILF, or every law school seems to have that, but a little bit different structure. But I remember the networking I had to do to help raise the money for that, the different alumni and law firms locally that I interacted with, and my law school peers, which is generally how you raise a lot of those funds. Helped me realize that when it came, I had done a little fundraising before that, so I knew I could do fundraising, but PILF, we raised around $70,000 in our organization. That was a record at the time. I know that some schools raise a lot more than that, but for us that was a big deal. And I needed to raise about $100,000 to run for office. So to me, which I know sounds intimidating, but once you've raised 70 for PILF, I kind of thought it didn't seem as intimidating when I was trying to decide whether I had what it took to step out there and run for office. So that experience was helpful. It also, the networking that I did in law school, my law professors were probably my biggest donors when I ran for office, my biggest supporters. My law school classmates, I don't make a lot of huge donations. I don't get a lot of huge donations. I get a lot of small donations. So those are stepping up now, though, as my law school classmates do better and better. So
Stay in touch.
I still don't. But yeah, so developing that network was very important. And again, the access to state government was very helpful when I had to make a case to the people where I ran to say, oh, I have all this state government experience, even though I was kind of an intern in the Senate doing they don't know that out in my district. So you kind of fudge that a little bit, talk about how important you were. But I would also say too, and an earlier panelist mentioned this, I always kept my foot in the political scene. I volunteered for candidates, local on up to statewide candidates. My first summer, I worked for our gubernatorial candidate whose campaign was going on then for free. I had a paid job as well, but I did as much as I could for him. So just keeping myself politically active, I think that's important for any person who's interested in pursuing politics, because it's not something where you can just come up, show them your resume, and you know, they'll know how great you are. They won't. They'll want to see your credentials for politics and who you volunteered for, how much work you've done, and that you're a true Democrat, you're true on their ideals. That's something I think we're always a little worried about if people don't have any political experience, because there's so much, there's governing, but the politics are also just nonstop. So,
Kathleen, and just to piggyback off that, it's really important to be involved politically if you're going to be doing it, going into the public interest world too. Some of the people that got me the connections to meet with the foundations were a lot of the people that worked in the legislature, that were the state senators, that really could go to bat for me with some of those foundations and those funders. That I think it's the same for both worlds if you're looking at that. So be engaged in that, because they will go to bat for you.
Could you each, if it comes to mind, think of a highlight or a campaign that was particularly successful that you think would be of interest to students here, or an obstacle that you had to overcome in either a project or with a client or in a part of your campaign or in the House?
I would say the obstacles that I've had to overcome are both sexism and ageism. Have been difficult. A lot of times I'll walk, even around the State House, and someone will assume I'm someone's intern, or that I'm, the administrative assistant. I often walk into rooms where it's entirely men. I've testified. Our numbers are really bad in Ohio. They're bad everywhere, but they're especially bad in Ohio with women in government. So I'll testify. I have a domestic violence bill I'm trying to get through the legislature, and the committee that it's currently pending before is entirely made up of men. So those are tough obstacles to overcome, and are intimidating. I mean, sometimes it can be a group of great men who support your issue, and but just the optics of it are intimidating. And my first year, I'm in my third year in the legislature, but the first year I could tell that the people in power in the legislature just didn't know what to make of me. I just looked so different than all the other, the older white men, and I think they just were very disrespectful of me, would gavel me down in committees if I tried to ask too many questions, or it was tough. It still is tough, but that is something that's gotten better with time. And I just feel like, sadly, I mean, it's 2013, but I'm a pioneer trying to get in there. I want women law students to come work for me. I try to, encourage women's leadership, and just think, this is a role that I have to fulfill, and it will get better, but I have to actively think about it and do what I can to change it.
Great. Mariangela?
Good.
I think that sometimes a lot of the people that I work with on policy issues, a lot of the other executive directors are a lot older than me, and they have a lot more experience. I think one of the things that's good about being young is you don't carry that baggage. As you get involved in politics, or as you get involved in the public interest world, there's competing interests in both, and sometimes you have to take positions that people don't like, or you're not able to take a position that they feel like your organization should take, and they feel like you've burned them, or their cause, or you don't care about them. And so I was able to go into it without any baggage at all, and be able to kind of play off that, and just want to work together with people. So in reality, being young, I think, has more advantages kind of in the public interest nonprofit world, just because people are, number one, usually pretty excited to see that you're engaged, and then number two, you don't have to deal with all the baggage and the infighting and stuff like that, or you don't have those battle scars, I guess I should say. I mean, the other thing too is that sometimes certain foundations or financial supporters that haven't ever met me before, they're a little skeptical of me and my experience, and that I maybe don't know what I'm doing, and so sometimes you have to really convince them just through your demeanor and your organization that you're effective and that you're going to be a good steward of their funding, but I think that oftentimes you have to prepare 2 times more maybe than somebody else who has more experience and has proven themselves. So I think that those are some of the barriers, not nearly probably as insurmountable as some of the barriers that not insurmountable, you're surmounting them. So,
because this project is in the law school, I was probably shielded from a lot of the barriers that someone normally starting a nonprofit initiative would have. I didn't really have to stress about funding. I did apply for our Public Interest Law Foundation. Stanford gave us a grant in our first year to offer our clients a little bit of startup expenses after graduation. But I had the support of our Student Affairs Office and the Criminal Justice Center in that regard. But I think one of the things that I had to learn how to answer, the question I had to learn how to answer pretty early on was, is this really helpful? The thing that you kind of come across with reentry programs all the time is, does this really matter? Is this really making a difference? Is it actually going to reduce the recidivism rate? I know for me, the enormity of the problem of the criminal justice system is overwhelming, and so I just decided very early on that I was going to focus on the fact that this is one person at a time. I'm not trying to change the entire criminal justice system. I'm just trying to have an impact on a single person's life whenever I can. Giving someone the opportunity to gain skills that they'll need to make a living affects not only that particular person, but it affects their family, it affects their friends. Having other people around them see that they're able to do these things, they share the information they get from this program with people they know. This year, one of our clients was referred by a client that we had last year, and I think that that matters. It's not this big, huge institutional change, but I think that affecting the life of a single person and a single family really matters, and it makes a difference. And I also try to remind people that you are where you are, but imagine if that one worst thing you had done in your life was being carried over you and preventing you from moving on. That would matter to you too. And so it's a little bit of an emotional appeal, a little bit of just the practical side of me, that it's really hard to do things that make this big institutional change. And I like to see some immediate benefit. I like to see what my clients get out of this in a more immediate sense.
Great. Can I add one thing real quick? I didn't want it to be too doom and gloom, because I know the other part of what you said was some highlights we've had. And I would like to say that, in Ohio, I know we're a big swing state, important state, and we helped send President Obama to the White House for re-election. But 2010 was a terrible year for us, and we're entirely Republican. Every statewide office holder is Republican, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. It's bad. So actually, that's actually kind of an obstacle. But in some ways, it's been an opportunity for me, because our Democratic state legislators are kind of it as far as party spokespeople in the state of Ohio, and other than Sherrod Brown, who's great but is in D.C. a lot and on a national spokesperson. So I've had great media coverage. I get covered in our statewide newspapers, which are a big deal for a state legislator. I've been on MSNBC. I've gotten national media coverage, which when you're in the minority in the legislature, often that's your big aim, is you're trying to get out directly to the people, and the media help you do that. So that's been a highlight for me and a big opportunity for me. And I've already been rumored as a possible statewide candidate, which I'm not going to be that for a while, but it's nice to have that kind of buzz, and that only helps my career and helps me to be able to build my network and attract new donors and do a better job as an advocate in the legislature. I also get, where a lot of times I'm beating my head against the wall when I'm down in Columbus, when I'm back in my district, people now, maybe in the very beginning they were a little skeptical, who's this young person? I'm from a tiny town in my district. I represent about 110,000 people, but my hometown only is about 1,500 people. So it was a lot to overcome to get them to decide to vote for me. But the kind of positive feedback I get from doing the constituent work, which is the other side of what my office does, there's the policy, nitty-gritty, but also just helping people who call my office with a veteran benefit issue or an unemployment issue or a foreclosure issue or anything. I think I'm starting to get more and more calls because people view me as a helpful resource. And just some of the letters I've gotten about people who have had problems for decades that my office intervened with and were able to help them resolve is quite a reward. I know that there's people in here who do amazing public interest work, and you get more of that and share that experience. But just to have somebody say you're not just another politician, like you really stood up for me and fought for me in my particular issue, and they will vote for you, until they're dead, and they'll tell everyone else to do the same, and it just builds your ability to continue to be successful and to represent them.
Great. Adam or Angela, do you have a success story or highlight that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I guess there's been, in addition to policy work and then also civic engagement programs, we are getting into litigation as well. So we filed 2 Help America Vote Act complaints in Douglas County, which is Omaha, which is the largest metro area. Our illustrious election commissioner decided to close a third of the polling locations right before the presidential primary. And these polling locations were disproportionately closed, and you guessed it, lower income areas that have traditionally higher Democratic turnout, and the election commissioner is of the other party. So there were several complaints that we filed. We were successful on both of them, so that's great. These were administrative complaints. We would have taken them to federal court after that, but they were resolved there. In addition, one of the things that really put our organization on the map, which this is another thing, being able to have a few victories every once in a while show that you're being effective. And victory can be defined in very different ways. So you don't always have to actually win the battle. You can kind of take the cause or whatever you're fighting for just forward a little bit. But we organized a statewide opposition to voter ID in Nebraska. So we had 30 organizations as a part of the coalition, everybody from the AARP to ACLU, you name it. And we were able to defeat it on the floor of the legislature with an 8-hour filibuster. So we were one of the few conservative-dominated legislatures in the country to defeat voter ID, and we're really proud of that. And we were able to use that.
Us too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that's great. Okay.
It was really hard.
Awesome.
So
Let's talk about this afterward because it's coming back up. But
yeah, it'll be back.
That's awesome.
Sure.
I knew that there was 2 others. Somebody told me that there's 2 or 3 others. But so yeah, the victories are what keep you going, and be careful. Not to get down, because you lose a lot. You lose a lot more than you win. And even when you lose, you have to look at, have I propelled the conversation a little bit further? Have I educated people on the issue, even though we may have not won the final battle? So keep it in perspective.
As I said, my idea for this is kind of small victories. One of the best moments for me was this year following up with one of our graduates from last year who designs and makes handmade gifts for out of repurposed goods. And after graduation last year, she started working on really getting her inventory up and going out and selling her stuff to people. She's a full-time student and works part-time. And she went out and started selling things to people she worked with. And when I followed up with her in the fall, she told me she had sold 30 or 40 of her items. She had made almost $1,000 in income doing this. The way our program is set up, every other week is traditional in-class training. But in the weeks in between, the clients meet with their mentor groups, which is a Stanford Law student, a Stanford Business School student, and then an executive here from Silicon Valley. And her executive mentor had connected her with a woman that he had known for a long time who brought her out to the East Bay, and she did some landscape design for this woman. And this woman, in exchange for that, offered her free services to make her website. And so just hearing that she's been able to use these connections and actually parlay that into another stream of income is huge for her. She spent almost 20 years in prison and is coming out and has been, working her hardest. She changed her major from fashion design to business because she had learned so much and she just wanted to really pursue that even more. So for me, those types of, that type of success that our clients are having on an individual basis are what brings me the most joy in doing the program.
That's really amazing. So I'd like to open it up to your questions now. So if you guys have some questions in mind, you can come up to the mics.
Hi, I'm Amalia. I'm a public interest law student at UCLA. I guess I wanted to ask how you guys went about defining and deciding on the scope of your advocacy projects. So, you know, what strategic decisions, how did you come to it? I know, Angela, you spoke a little bit about this earlier, but I'd love to hear more from all of you on it.
Well, for me, it just, I mean, for our organization, it really just started out about capacity. Sometimes you only have so many resources and so much time to do so much. So as we've expanded, we've went from just policy to then also civic engagement programs. And then, you know, when I got my legal license, we were able to start taking on individual clients whose voting rights had been affected. So, you know, as far as deciding scope, it was really kind of more about resources and time, and then also about you have to be adaptable. There are certain opportunities that will come up where it may not be right down your mission or your path, but there'll be resources and it'll be a part of your overall goal. And so it really is kind of flexible and really dependent on your time and your resources and what issues are out there.
This isn't quite as applicable as these two, who I'm amazed by starting a nonprofit. But deciding where to run for office is an interesting scope question. I think a lot of people start a little bit lower, maybe at the local level or city council or township trustee or whatever, you know, the unit of government is. Although in some places that's bigger than what I represent, so it kind of all depends. But I knew that for me, I had that experience in the State House, and there's kind of a recipe in Ohio, depending on the index of the district. Some districts cannot be won by someone of the opposite party, you know, no matter what you do. But there's a lot of districts that are in that, not a lot anymore, but there's some that are competitive still, and then some kind of on the fringe. And their recipe sort of is that you can raise $100,000 and you can knock on about 10,000 doors. And you have to craft a good message and, you know, have something to go to those doors to talk about and hand them. But that was kind of the recipe that I sort of became aware of as I was working in the State House. And I thought I could do it. Again, after having raised that type of money in law school, and the law school work ethic, 10,000 doors sounds like a lot, but it's doable. I mean, because, you know, I just came out of doing, you know, working crazy hours and overcommitting myself to things. So I felt like I could do it and decided, although it raised a lot of eyebrows, that I was going to start there. There are other young legislators. People don't know that. People are used to their, like, you know, old, you know, just that who is typically a politician. That's what people expect their state rep is. But there were a handful of young ones there, so I also knew it wasn't too crazy of an idea if they could do it.
As I said before, there are other programs that we talked to, but the one thing that was different is that most of them are working inside prisons or jails, which means you have a captive audience, you have a lot of time, and we wanted this to be a student-run, student-directed project, so we knew that we had to fit it in a normal school year. So just going from those programs might have been 32 weeks, we brought it down to be a 12-week program here. We wanted it to involve the business community, and so we had to find a way that it was enough time to be meaningful, but not so much time that it would be overwhelming. And so our scope limitations were just limited mostly by what we wanted the project to be and what we wanted people to bring to the project. So,
great.
Hi, my name is Abby. I'm from Indiana University, and specifically for Kathleen and Adam, I've always been kind of interested in either running for office or at least doing legislation and policy work. And Indiana, kind of like Nebraska and parts of Ohio, not exactly friendly. So how do you deal with atmosphere that's not necessarily hostile, but just not really the kind of place that supports your ideals?
I actually would say it's hostile right now. So You know, I've been a real advocate on the two issues that got me involved or wanted to make me run for office were voting rights and indigent defense. My dad is a legal aid lawyer and was a legal aid lawyer until his whole career until he retired about a year ago. And when I worked in the State House, I was slightly appalled by how little knowledge people had of those two issues, or really that they didn't care much about those issues. Even the Democrats. I mean, even the Democrats, where I would think access to justice, to me, that's a key plank of the Democratic Party platform. But I helped my dad actually try to lobby for increased funding because the funding kind of fell out from under legal aids with how one of the main revenue streams going towards legal aid. So we tried to boost it in another area, and it was like talking to the wall, even talking to the Democrats. And I just, you know, everywhere I've gone, I feel like I end up saying, okay, I'm not close enough to the power source. So working as a staffer, I just felt like I need to be the legislator. I need to be the one that makes the decisions and pushes these issues and makes them important. So, you know, that's one way I dealt with a hostile environment, is to try to join it and change it from within, I would say. Also, you know, you got to look at the math of the areas and figure out where you have the best shot of winning. And sometimes it's not that palatable for people, but, you know, I moved back home. You know, to people in rural Ohio or who've grown up in, a lot of people leave Ohio and they live out here in, you know, the beautiful Bay Area or in New York or DC. We actually have a problem in Ohio. We're losing a lot of our young talent because they, you know, go for greener pastures or more exciting, you know, places for young people to be. So I kind of sacrificed, and sort of, I mean, I love it there, but it was hard to move back home where none of my friends were anymore and you know, give it a try. But I needed to do that to be successful. So it was a bit of a sacrifice, and you sort of have to look at where you're politically, where your chances are the best. And often they're the best where you grew up because you have more credibility in an area where you're from than a new area. Not always. People definitely do it in other parts. And I probably could have run in Columbus where I was, but just the year that it was, that district was already had a candidate and my home district didn't. And so I had kind of a very quick time period to decide, can I go back home, you know, 2.5 hours away from here out in the country, and convince all these people that you know, I haven't been gone too long, or that I understand their issues. And I kind of took the plunge and barely won, but am glad I did it, and it worked out.
Yeah, I think that what really motivates me to do my job and what really excites me is the fact that Nebraska is so hostile to what we do. And to me, that's what makes it exciting. I have a lot of friends that leave Nebraska that are great, progressive, public interest folks who just kind of get fed up with it. But for me, that's what motivates me. And particularly when you're in more of these conservative states, people really look for young progressive leadership, and they will seek that out, and you have to seek them out too, and show that you're effective. But I think that the battles that we're fighting in states like Nebraska, if we can start winning those battles in Nebraska, we can win them anywhere else. And that's what makes it really exciting for me, and that's why I really enjoy staying in Nebraska and fighting a lot of battles that I often lose. I mean, I have election day registration legislation introduced every single year in the legislature, and I joke at the beginning of my testimony for that legislation that I intend to come to this body with this piece of legislation every year until you guys finally figure it out. And I'm like, I've got 60 years on you guys. You know, we can sit here. You know, there's term limits. I mean, I'm just biding my time. You know, and you have to be persistent. You have to keep bringing it back year after year. But for me, it's not a problem that I'm in a conservative state. That's the challenge. That's what fires me up.
So Adam and Kathleen, I know that you both were fairly active in your student chapters of ACS when you were in law school. Could you talk a little bit about those experiences and maybe your involvement post-graduation and how that's furthered your career goals? or just provided inspiration at certain points.
Definitely.
Well, I was just talking to Kathleen about how, since we deal with voting rights, I've met some amazing voting rights leaders in ACS. Dan Takaji, which I think was your professor, and I think a board member of ACS. He's been amazing, and his resources and the connections that he had was, have been really valuable in finding out information that's pretty important to some of the stuff that we're doing in Nebraska. So my involvement in ACS in that regard helped out my nonprofit, and it made some connections. And I mean, as far as, again, one of the great things about ACS at Nebraska College of Law is there's, maybe 4 or 5 progressives that are really outspoken. And so a lot of people come to our events because they're topics that don't get discussed very often in the law school. And so my involvement in ACS really kind of actually, I think, propelled some issues in our law school and made people think twice about them. But then it also helped out my nonprofit as well, I think.
I would say that ACS in the law school sense helped me with leadership experience. We had to found the group, work with Dan Takaji, who is our faculty advisor, to get it up and running and network with the national student chapter staff. And it was a good experience for me to get that experience, and also just to figure out who were my like-minded colleagues, who were the students in my law school who are going to be, big state school in Ohio, they're all around me now. Now we're all colleagues in the legal profession, and I know who the ACS people are, who care about these issues, who I can go to, who I could go to then as a 2L, or now when I'm trying to push an issue like trying to do something about the indigent defense system in Ohio. So developing that leadership experience, the networking, when I wanted to run for office, again, the ACS chapter in Columbus, it's a big chapter, but if you ask each, I got to raise money when I'm running for office. So, there's some big firm lawyers who are involved, and not just the people who are on the actual ACS board or in the group, but if they have invite me to their firm, then I meet more of their colleagues, and then I follow that up a month later with a fundraising ask, and it's helped me build my donor pool and my network, which in politics really is everything. And I'm one of the biggest fundraisers for the party in Ohio, and it really is because of the lawyer networks I developed, and ACS has really helped me do that, even on the national level. And when I go to the national convention, it helps me kind of expand my pool of people that I know as a resource, and even as donors. Finally, on issue help. Just the other day, we were trying to attack John Husted in Ohio, which I try to do on a regular basis. God
bless you.
But thank you. But there was Ohio's way behind on the motor voter law. I mean, we're terrible in a lot of voting areas, but this is one that is being pushed around, and that has to do with voter registration. And I was pushing on the administration, the governor as well, for how bad we are at making sure our BMVs are registering people to vote. And I'm sitting in committee asking questions of the state BMV director, and I in Google put in BMV, or I don't know, it was like National Voter Registration Act, and boom, an ACS issue brief comes up. And because the chairman had tried to tell me that, the BMV this is a Secretary of State issue, not a BMV issue. And right there, I was able to pull up and say, actually, that issue's been litigated, and this person is responsible, and it was like real time ACS help. But going to the convention is helpful. I'm constantly getting ideas for legislation or ideas for how to fight back and be a stronger advocate on the state level. This has been helpful to me. When I was listening to the amazing speech last night, I hear, okay, Colorado has the model system for indigent defense. I'm going to look at what they have and see if I can introduce legislation in Ohio that models their system. So ACS has been, from an early time in law school, helpful, but the lessons and the help just keep coming. So not to be an ACS commercial, I'm sure that, that's helpful, but it is just something I encourage you to be involved in now and stay involved in, because it can really help you out.
So I think we have time for one more question if there's another question from the audience. Great. Take your time.
This is mostly for Angela, since you actually started this in law school, and I think might be relevant for everyone here that works a lot with their chapters and works really hard for those 3 years to really build something. The thing about law school is that it does end after 3 years and you have to move on. What's going to happen to Project Remade, and how have you kind of anticipated that and tried to deal with that issue, as you look forward through the last year?
I mean, this is a founder's problem generally, right, where it's going to continue without you, and so you worry about what it's going to be like. But we have a lot of students involved with Project Remade this year. We have over 30 students between the law school and the business school involved. And so between some of those students, most of them are 1Ls and 2Ls. There are just a few 3Ls involved. I know that there will be some people to take up the torch. Obviously, no one in their right mind is going to commit to do the amount of work that I've done. So it's going to be structured a bit different. There will likely be more of a board structure than, a dictator, which I try not to. I try not to be, but there will have to be kind of a spreading of the responsibility. I brought in, we had a lot of 1Ls involved this year, and so they're involved in everything from teaching to mentoring to writing the curriculum. And so having multiple people that know what the functions are that actually make it happen really makes a difference. And then, of course, Debbie, our executive director of our criminal justice center that helped me start it, will still be here, and she knows how everything works and what needs to be done when. And then finally, I have been able to get some directed research credit to put together, that I'm using anyway, to put together kind of a book about how this happens, going through all of my emails and making sure I print those out, who I emailed, how we started looking for clients, how we came up with our requirements for clients, just kind of documenting everything that's in my head, not only for the continuation of the project, but because I'm interested in continuing this idea in the future. And so having that written down somewhere in a repository in a way will be helpful to both the continuation of the project and then I think there are people expecting it to happen, which helps put pressure on students who maybe not would otherwise continue, because people will be asking them, when are you guys starting up again? Who's leading this? Who's going to be doing it? And so I like the public pressure part of it, and I just make sure to tell people, be looking for it next year. When people call me about wanting to be involved, look for it next year. You can email this person and they'll let you know. So if you have people from the outside putting pressure as well as students. And then this year, one of the biggest surprises I should have mentioned earlier is that when we put out our request for executive mentors, we used our external relations office and just kind of hit our SLS alumni. We had over 50 executives respond wanting to be mentors, and so they'll be expecting for this project to continue and expect to be involved in it again. So hopefully a combination of all of those things will help it continue.
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm certainly feeling inspired to do something. Hopefully everyone here will now be running for office and starting their own nonprofit. So I think that we're going to be transitioning into breakout sessions. The rooms, again, correspond with the number on the back of your name tag from the dinner last night. So hopefully you'll get a chance to meet up with the panelists either now or at the breakout session. If we could just thank them again for their time.